Charles Milles Manson, born Maddox, November 12, 1934, November 19, 2017, was an American criminal and cult leader. In mid-1967, he formed what became known as the Manson Family, a quasi-commune based in California. His followers committed a series of 9 murders at 4 locations in July and August 1969. Although the motive for the murders was disputed by Manson, the Los Angeles County District Attorney believed that Manson intended to start a race war. In 1971, he was convicted of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder for the deaths of 7 people, including the film actress Sharon Tate. The prosecution contended that, while Manson never directly ordered the murders, his ideology constituted an overt act of conspiracy. Before the murders, Manson had spent more than half of his life in correctional institutions. When he began gathering his cult following, he was a singer-songwriter on the fringe of the Los Angeles music industry, chiefly through a chance association with Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys, who introduced Manson to record producer Terry Melcher. In 1968, the Beach Boys recorded Manson's song Cease to Exist, retitled Never Learn Not to Love as the B-side on one of their singles, but without credit to Manson. Wilson and Melcher severed ties with Manson around early 1969. The Los Angeles District Attorney said that Manson was obsessed with the Beatles, particularly their 1968 self-titled album. Manson had claimed to be guided by his interpretation of the Beatles' lyrics and adopted the term Helter Skelter to describe an impending apocalyptic race war. At trial, the prosecution submitted that Manson and his followers believed that the murders would help precipitate that war. Other contemporary interviews and those who testified during Manson's trial insisted that the Tate LaBianca murders were copycat crimes designed to exonerate Manson's friend Bobby Beausoleil. Manson's notoriety as an emblem of insanity, violence, and the macabre has also influenced pop culture. Recordings of songs written and performed by Manson were released commercially, starting with Lie, The Love and Terror Cult, 1970. Various musicians have covered some of his songs. Although originally sentenced to death, his sentence was commuted to life with the possibility of parole after the California Supreme Court invalidated the state's death penalty statutes in 1972. He served his life sentence at California State Prison, Corcoran, and died at age 83 in late 2017. Charles Manson was born on November 12, 1934, to 16-year-old Kathleen Manson Bauer-Cavender, née Maddox, 1918–1973, in the University of Cincinnati Academic Health Center in Cincinnati, Ohio. He was first named no-name Maddox. Within weeks, he was called Charles Milles Maddox. Manson's biological father appears to have been Colonel Walker Henderson Scott Sr., 1910–1954 of Catlettsburg, Kentucky, against whom Kathleen Maddox filed a paternity suit that resulted in an agreed judgment in 1937. Manson may never have known his biological father. Scott worked intermittently in local mills, and also had a local reputation as a con artist. He allowed Maddox to believe that he was an Army colonel, although colonel was merely his given name. When Maddox told Scott that she was pregnant, he told her he had been called away on Army business. After several months she realized he had no intention of returning. In August 1934, before Manson's birth, Maddox married William Eugene Manson, 1909–1961, a laborer at a dry cleaning business. Maddox often went on drinking sprees with her brother Luther, leaving Charles with multiple babysitters. They divorced on April 30, 1937. After William alleged gross neglect of duty by Maddox. Charles retained William's last name, Manson. On August 1, 1939, Luther and Kathleen Maddox were arrested for assault and robbery. Kathleen and Luther were sentenced to 5 and 10 years of imprisonment, respectively. Manson was placed in the home of an aunt and uncle in Macomb, West Virginia. His mother was paroled in 1942. Manson later characterized the first weeks after she returned from prison as the happiest time in his life. Weeks after Maddox's release, Manson's family moved to Charleston, West Virginia, where Manson continually played truant and his mother spent her evenings drinking. She was arrested for grand larceny, but not convicted. The family later moved to Indianapolis, where Maddox met an alcoholic named Lewis, no first name, through Alcoholics Anonymous meetings and married him in August 1943. In an interview with Diane Sawyer, Manson said that when he was 9, he set his school on fire. Manson also got in trouble for truancy and petty theft. Although there was a lack of foster home placements, in 1947, at the age of 13, Manson was placed in the Geraldo School for Boys in Terre Haute, Indiana, a school for male delinquents run by Catholic priests. Geraldo was a strict school, where punishment for even the tiniest infraction included beatings with either a wooden paddle or a leather strap. Manson ran away from Geraldo and slept in the woods, under bridges, and wherever else he could find shelter. Manson fled home to his mother, and spent Christmas 1947 in Mcmshin, at his aunt and uncle's house. His mother returned him to Geraldo. 10 months later, he ran away to Indianapolis. In 1948, in Indianapolis, Manson committed his first known crime by robbing a grocery store. At first, the robbery was simply to find something to eat. However, Manson found a cigar box containing just over $100, and he took the money. He used the money to rent a room on Indianapolis's Skid Row and to buy food. For a time, Manson tried to go straight by getting a job delivering messages for Western Union. However, he quickly began to supplement his wages through petty theft. He was eventually caught, and in 1949 a sympathetic judge sent him to Boys Town, a juvenile facility in Omaha, Nebraska. After 4 days at Boys Town, he and fellow student Blackie Nielsen obtained a gun and stole a car. They used it to commit 2 armed robberies on their way to the home of Nielsen's uncle in Peoria, Illinois. Nielsen's uncle was a professional thief, and when the boys arrived he allegedly took them on as apprentices. Manson was arrested 2 weeks later during a nighttime raid on a Peoria store. In the investigation that followed, he was linked to his 2 earlier armed robberies. He was sent to the Indiana Boys School, a strict reform school. At the school, other students allegedly raped Manson with the encouragement of a staff member, and he was repeatedly beaten. He ran away from the school 18 times. While at the school, Manson developed a self-defense technique he later called the insane game. When he was physically unable to defend himself, he would screech, grimace and wave his arms to convince aggressors that he was insane. After a number of failed attempts, he escaped with 2 other boys in February 1951. The 3 escapees were robbing filling stations while attempting to drive to California in stolen cars when they were arrested in Utah. For the federal crime of driving a stolen car across state lines, Manson was sent to Washington, D.C.'s National Training School for Boys. On arrival, he was given aptitude tests which determined that he was illiterate, but had an above-average IQ of 109. His caseworker deemed him aggressively antisocial. On a psychiatrist's recommendation, Manson was transferred in October 1951 to Natural Bridge Honor Camp, a minimum security institution. His aunt visited him and told administrators she would let him stay at her house and would help him find work. Manson had a parole hearing scheduled for February 1952. However, in January, he was caught raping a boy at knife point. Manson was transferred to the Federal Reformatory in Petersburg, Virginia. There he committed a further 8 serious disciplinary offenses, 3 involving homosexual acts. He was then moved to a maximum security reformatory at Chillicothe, Ohio, where he was expected to remain until his release on his 21st birthday in November 1955. Good behavior led to an early release in May 1954, to live with his aunt and uncle in Mcmshin. In January 1955, Manson married a hospital waitress named Rosalie Jean Willis. Around October, About 3 months after he and his pregnant wife arrived in Los Angeles in a car he had stolen in Ohio, Manson was again charged with a federal crime for taking the vehicle across state lines. After a psychiatric evaluation, he was given 5 years probation. Manson's failure to appear at a Los Angeles hearing on an identical charge filed in Florida resulted in his March 1956 arrest in Indianapolis. His probation was revoked. He was sentenced to 3 years imprisonment at Terminal Island, San Pedro, California. While Manson was in prison, Rosalie gave birth to their son Charles Manson Jr. During his first year at Terminal Island, Manson received visits from Rosalie and his mother, who were now living together in Los Angeles. In March 1957, when the visits from his wife ceased, his mother informed him Rosalie was living with another man. Less than 2 weeks before a scheduled parole hearing, Manson tried to escape by stealing a car. He was given 5 years probation and his parole was denied. Manson received 5 years parole in September 1958, the same year in which Rosalie received a decree of divorce. By November, he was pimping a 16-year-old girl and was receiving additional support from a girl with wealthy parents. In September 1959, he pleaded guilty to a charge of attempting to cash a forged U.S. Treasury check, which he claimed to have stolen from a mailbox. The latter charge was later dropped. He received a 10-year suspended sentence and probation after a young woman named Leona, who had an arrest record for prostitution, made a tearful plea before the court that she and Manson were deeply in love, and would marry if Charlie were freed. Before the year's end, the woman did marry Manson, possibly so she would not be required to testify against him. Manson took Leona and another woman to New Mexico for purposes of prostitution, resulting in him being held and questioned for violating the Mann Act. Though he was released, Manson correctly suspected that the investigation had not ended. When he disappeared in violation of his probation, a bench warrant was issued. An indictment for violation of the Mann Act followed in April 1960. Following the arrest of one of the women for prostitution, Manson was arrested in June in Laredo, Texas, and was returned to Los Angeles. For violating his probation on the check cashing charge, he was ordered to serve his 10-year sentence. Manson spent a year trying unsuccessfully to appeal the revocation of his probation. In July 1961, he was transferred from the Los Angeles County Jail to the United States Penitentiary at McNeil Island, Washington. There, he took guitar lessons from Barker Karpus gang leader Alvin Creepy Karpus, and obtained from another inmate a contact name of someone at Universal Studios in Hollywood, Phil Kaufman. According to Jeff Kinn's 2013 biography of Manson, his mother moved to Washington state to be closer to him during his McNeil Island incarceration, working nearby as a waitress. Although the Mann Act charge had been dropped, the attempt to cash the Treasury check was still a federal offense. Manson's September 1961 annual review noted he had a tremendous drive to call attention to himself, an observation echoed in September 1964. In 1963, Leona was granted a divorce. During the process, she alleged that she and Manson had a son, Charles Luther. According to a popular urban legend, Manson auditioned unsuccessfully for the Monkees in late 1965. This is refuted by the fact that Manson was still incarcerated at McNeil Island at that time. In June 1966, Manson was sent for the second time to Terminal Island in preparation for early release. By the time of his release day on March 21, 1967, he had spent more than half of his 32 years in prisons and other institutions. This was mainly because he had broken federal laws. Federal sentences were, and remain, much more severe than state sentences for many of the same offenses. Telling the authorities that prison had become his home, he requested permission to stay. After being discharged from prison in 1967, Manson began attracting a group of followers, mostly young women, from around California. They were later known as the Manson family. The core members of Manson's group following included Charles Tex Watson, a musician and former actor; Robert Beausoleil, a former musician and pornographic actor; Mary Brunner, previously a librarian; Susan Atkins, Linda Kasabian, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Leslie Van Houten. The Manson family developed into a doomsday cult when Manson became fixated on the idea of an imminent apocalyptic race war between America's black population and the larger white population. A white supremacist, Manson believed that black people in America would rise up and kill all whites except for Manson and his family, but that they were not intelligent enough to survive on their own. They would need a white man to lead them, and so they would serve Manson as their master. Late in 1968, Manson adopted the term Helter Skelter, taken from a song on the Beatles' recently released White Album, to refer to this upcoming war. In early August 1969, Manson encouraged his followers to start Helter Skelter, by committing murders in Los Angeles and making it appear to be racially motivated. The Manson family gained national notoriety after the murder of actress Sharon Tate and 4 others in her home on August 8 and 9. 1969, and Leno and Rosemary LaBianca the next day. Tex Watson and 3 other members of the family executed the Tate-LaBianca murders, allegedly acting under Manson's instructions. While it was later accepted at trial that Manson never expressly ordered for the murders, his behavior constituted a conviction of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Evidence pointed to Manson's obsession with inciting a race war by killing those he thought were pigs and his belief that this would show the nigger how to do the same. Family members were also responsible for other assaults, thefts, crimes, and the attempted assassination of President Gerald Ford in Sacramento by Lynette Squeaky Fromm. While it is often thought that Manson never murdered or attempted to murder anyone himself, true crime writer James Buddy Day, in his book Hippie Cult Leader, The Last Words of Charles Manson, claimed that Manson shot drug dealer Bernard Crowe on July 1, 1969. Crowe survived. The state of California tried Manson for the Tate and LaBianca murders with co-defendants, Leslie Van Houten, Susan Atkins, and Patricia Krenwinkel. Co-defendant Tex Watson was tried at a later date after being extradited from Texas. The trial began on July 15, 1970. Manson appeared wearing fringed buckskins, his typical clothing at Spahn Ranch. On July 24, 1970, the first day of testimony, Manson appeared in court with an X carved into his forehead. His followers issued a statement from Manson saying, "I have X'd myself from your world." The following day, Manson's co-defendants, Van Houten, Atkins, and Krenwinkel, also appeared in court, with an X carved in their foreheads. Members of the Manson family camped outside of the courthouse and held a vigil on a street corner because they were excluded from the courtroom for being disruptive. Some of Manson's followers also carved crosses into their heads. During the trial, members of the Manson family appeared in saffron robes and threatened to immolate themselves if Manson was convicted, just as nuns in Vietnam had done in protest of the war. The state presented dozens of witnesses during the trial. However, its primary witness was Linda Kasabian, who was present during the Tate murders on August 8-9, 1969. Kasabian provided graphic testimony of the Tate murders, which she observed from outside the house. She was also in the car with Manson on the following evening, when he ordered the LaBianca killings. Kasabian spent days on the witness stand, being cross-examined by the defendant's lawyers. After testifying, Kasabian went into hiding for the next 40 years. In early August 1970, President Richard Nixon told reporters that he believed that Manson was guilty of the murders, either directly or indirectly. Manson obtained a copy of the newspaper and held up the headline to the jury. The defendant's attorneys then called for a mistrial, arguing that their clients had allegedly killed far fewer people than Nixon's war machine in Vietnam. Judge Charles H. Older polled each member of the jury, to determine whether each juror saw the headline and whether it affected his or her ability to make an independent decision. All of the jurors affirmed that they could still decide independently. Shortly after, the female defendants, Atkins, Krenwinkel, and Van Houten, were removed from the room for chanting, "Nixon says we are guilty. So why to go on?" On October 5, 1970, Manson attempted to kill Judge Older while the jury was present in the room. Manson first threatened Older, and then jumped over his lawyer's table with a sharpened pencil, in the direction of Older. Manson was restrained before reaching the judge. While being led out of the courtroom, Manson screamed at Older, "In the name of Christian justice, someone should cut your head off." Meanwhile, the female defendants began chanting something in Latin. Judge Older began wearing a .38 caliber pistol to the trial afterward. On November 16, 1970, the state of California rested its case after presenting 22 weeks' worth of evidence. The defendants then stunned the courtroom by announcing that they had no witnesses to present, and rested their case. Immediately after the defendants' counsel rested their case, the three female defendants shouted that they wanted to testify. Their attorneys advised the court, in chambers, that they opposed their clients testifying. Apparently, the female defendants wanted to testify that Manson had had nothing to do with the murders. The following day, Manson himself announced that he too wanted to testify. The judge allowed Manson to testify outside the presence of the jury. He stated as follows: "These children that come at you with knives, they are your children. You taught them. I didn't teach them. I just tried to help them stand up. Most of the people at the ranch that you call the family was just people that you did not want." Manson continued, equating his actions to those of society at large. "I know this, that in your hearts and your souls, you are as much responsible for the Vietnam War as I am for killing these people. I can't judge any of you. I have no malice against you and no ribbons for you. But I think that it is high time that you all start looking at yourselves and judging the lie that you live in." Manson concluded, claiming that he too was a creation of a system that he viewed as fundamentally violent and unjust. "My father is the jailhouse. My father is your system. I am only what you made me. I am only a reflection of you. You want to kill me? Ha! I am already dead, have been all my life. I've spent 23 years in tombs that you have built." After Manson finished speaking, Judge Older offered to let him testify before the jury. Manson replied that it was not necessary. Manson then told the female defendants that they no longer needed to testify. On November 30, 1970, Leslie Van Houten's attorney, Ronald Hughes, failed to appear for the closing arguments in the trial. He was later found dead in a California state park. His body was badly decomposed, and it was impossible to tell the cause of death. Hughes had disagreed with Manson during the trial, taking the position that his client, Van Houten, should not testify to claim that Manson had no involvement with the murders. Some have alleged that Hughes may have been murdered by the Manson family. On January 25, 1971, the jury found Manson, Krenwinkel, and Atkins guilty of first-degree murder in all 7 of the Tate and LaBianca killings. The jury found Van Houten guilty of murder in the first degree in the LaBianca killings. After the convictions, the court held a separate hearing before the same jury to determine if the defendants should receive the death sentence. Each of the 3 female defendants, Atkins, Van Houten, and Krenwinkel, took the stand. They provided graphic details of the murders and testified that Manson was not involved. According to the female defendants, they had committed the crimes in order to help fellow Manson family member Bobby Beausoleil get out of jail, where he was being held for the murder of Gary Hinman. The female defendants testified that the Tate-LaBianca murders were intended to be copycat crimes, similar to the Hinman killing. Atkins, Krenwinkel, and Van Houten claimed they did this under the direction of the state's prime witness, Linda Kasabian. The defendants did not express remorse for the killings. On March 4, 1971, during the sentencing hearings, Manson trimmed his beard to a fork and shaved his head, telling the media, "I am the devil, and the devil always has a bald head." However, The female defendants did not immediately shave their own heads. The state prosecutor, Vincent Bugliosi, later speculated in his book, Helter Skelter, that they refrained from doing so, in order to not appear to be completely controlled by Manson, as they had when they each carved an X in their foreheads, earlier in the trial. On March 29, 1971, the jury sentenced all 4 defendants to death. When the female defendants were led into the courtroom, each of them had shaved their heads, as had Manson. After hearing the sentence, Atkins shouted to the jury, "Better lock your doors and watch your kids." The Manson murder trial was the longest murder trial in American history when it occurred, lasting 9.5 months. The trial was among the most publicized American criminal cases of the 20th century and was dubbed the trial of the century. The jury had been sequestered for 225 days, longer than any jury before it. The trial transcript alone ran to 209 volumes or 31,716 pages. Manson was admitted to state prison from Los Angeles County on April 22, 1971, for 7 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of conspiracy to commit murder for the deaths of Abigail Ann Folger, Wojciech Frykowski, Stephen Earl Parent, Sharon Tate Polanski, J. Sebring, and Leno and Rosemary LaBianca. As the death penalty was ruled unconstitutional in 1972, Manson was resentenced to life with the possibility of parole. His initial death sentence was modified to life on February 2, 1977. On December 13, 1971, Manson was convicted of first-degree murder in Los Angeles County Court for the July 25, 1969 death of musician Gary Hinman. He was also convicted of first-degree murder for the August 1969 death of Donald Jerome Shorty Shea. Following the 1972 decision of California v. Anderson, California's death sentences were ruled unconstitutional and that any prisoner now under a sentence of death may file a petition for writ of habeas corpus in the Superior Court inviting that court to modify its judgment to provide for the appropriate alternative punishment of life imprisonment or life imprisonment without the possibility of parole specified by statute for the crime for which he was sentenced to death. Manson was thus eligible to apply for parole after 7 years incarceration. His first parole hearing took place on November 16, 1978, at California Medical Facility in Vacaville, where his petition was rejected. In the 1980s, Manson gave 4 interviews to the mainstream media. The first, recorded at California Medical Facility and aired on June 13, 1981, was by Tom Snyder for NBC's The Tomorrow Show. The second, recorded at San Quentin State Prison and aired on March 7, 1986, was by Charlie Rose for CBS News Night Watch, and it won the National News Emmy Award for Best Interview in 1987. The third, with Geraldo Rivera in 1988, was part of the journalist's primetime special on Satanism. At least as early as the Snyder interview, Manson's forehead bore a swastika in the spot where the X carved during his trial had been. Nicholas Schreck conducted an interview with Manson for his documentary Charles Manson Superstar, 1989. Schreck concluded that Manson was not insane but merely acting that way out of frustration. On September 25, 1984, Manson was imprisoned in the California Medical Facility at Vacaville when inmate Jan Holmstrom poured paint thinner on him and set him on fire, causing second- and third-degree burns on over 20% of his body. Holmstrom explained that Manson had objected to his Hare Krishna chants and verbally threatened him. After 1989, Manson was housed in the Protective Housing Unit at California State Prison, Corcoran, in Kings County. The unit housed inmates whose safety would be endangered by general population housing. He had also been housed at San Quentin State Prison, California Medical Facility in Vacaville, Folsom State Prison, and Pelican Bay State Prison. In June 1997, a prison disciplinary committee found that Manson had been trafficking drugs. He was moved from Corcoran State Prison to Pelican Bay State Prison a month later. On September 5, 2007, MSNBC aired The Mind of Manson, a complete version of a 1987 interview at California's San Quentin State Prison. The footage of the unshackled, unapologetic, and unruly Manson had been considered so unbelievable that only 7 minutes of it had originally been broadcast on Today, for which it had been recorded. In March 2009, a photograph of Manson showing a receding hairline, grizzled gray beard and hair, and the swastika tattoo still prominent on his forehead were released to the public by California corrections officials. In 2010, the Los Angeles Times reported that Manson was caught with a cell phone in 2009 and had contacted people in California, New Jersey, Florida, and British Columbia. A spokesperson for the California Department of Corrections stated that it was not known if Manson had used the phone for criminal purposes. Manson also recorded an album of acoustic pop songs with additional production by Henry Rollins, titled Completion. Only 5 copies were pressed, 2 belong to Rollins, while the other 3 are presumed to have been with Manson. The album remains unreleased. On January 1, 2017, Manson was suffering from gastrointestinal bleeding at California State Prison in Corcoran when he was rushed to Mercy Hospital in downtown Bakersfield. A source told the Los Angeles Times that Manson was seriously ill, and TMZ reported that his doctors considered him too weak for surgery. He was returned to prison on January 6, and the nature of his treatment was not disclosed. On November 15, 2017, an unauthorized source said that Manson had returned to a hospital in Bakersfield, but the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation did not confirm this in conformity with state and federal medical privacy laws. He died from cardiac arrest resulting from respiratory failure and colon cancer at the hospital on November 19. 3 people stated their intention to claim Manson's estate and body. Manson's grandson Jason Freeman stated his intent to take possession of Manson's remains and personal effects. Manson's pen pal Michael Channels claimed to have a Manson will dated February 14, 2002, which left Manson's entire estate and Manson's body to Channels. Manson's friend Ben Gurecki claimed to have a Manson will dated January 2017 which gives the estate and Manson's body to Matthew Roberts, another alleged son of Manson. In 2012, CNN ran a DNA match to see if Freeman and Roberts were related to each other and found that they were not. According to CNN, 2 prior attempts to DNA match Roberts with genetic material from Manson failed, but the results were reportedly contaminated. On March 12, 2018, the Kern County Superior Court in California decided in favor of Freeman in regard to Manson's body. Freeman had Manson cremated on March 20, 2018. As of February 7, 2020, Channels and Freeman still had petitioned to California courts attempting to establish the heir of Manson's estate. At that time, Channels was attempting to force Freeman to submit DNA to the court for testing. In 2009, Los Angeles disc jockey Matthew Roberts released correspondence and other evidence indicating that he might be Manson's biological son. Roberts' biological mother claims that she was a member of the Manson family who left in mid-1967 after being raped by Manson. She returned to her parents' home to complete the pregnancy, gave birth on March 22, 1968, and put Roberts up for adoption. CNN conducted a DNA test between Matthew Roberts and Manson's known biological grandson Jason Freeman in 2012, showing that Roberts and Freeman did not share DNA. Roberts subsequently attempted to establish that Manson was his father through a direct DNA test which proved definitively that Roberts and Manson were not related. In 2014, It was announced that the imprisoned Manson was engaged to 26-year-old Elaine Burton and had obtained a marriage license on November 7. Manson gave Burton the nickname Star. She had been visiting him in prison for at least 9 years and maintained several websites that proclaimed his innocence. The wedding license expired on February 5, 2015, without a marriage ceremony taking place. Journalist Daniel Simone reported that the wedding was cancelled after Manson discovered that Burton only wanted to marry him so that she and friend Craig Hammond could use his corpse as a tourist attraction after his death. According to Simone, Manson believed that he would never die and may simply have used the possibility of marriage as a way to encourage Burton and Hammond to continue visiting him and bringing him gifts. Burton said on her website that the reason that the marriage did not take place was merely logistical. Manson was suffering from an infection and had been in a prison medical facility for 2 months and could not receive visitors. She said that she still hoped that the marriage license would be renewed and the marriage would take place. On April 11, 2012, Manson was denied release at his 12th parole hearing, which he did not attend. After his March 27, 1997, parole hearing, Manson refused to attend any of his later hearings. The panel at that hearing noted that Manson had a history of controlling behavior and mental health issues including schizophrenia and paranoid delusional disorder, and was too great a danger to be released. The panel also noted that Manson had received 108 rule violation reports, had no indication of remorse, no insight into the causative factors of the crimes, lacked understanding of the magnitude of the crimes, had an exceptional, callous disregard for human suffering, and had no parole plans. At April 11, 2012, parole hearing, it was determined that Manson would not be reconsidered for parole for another 15 years. That is not before 2027, at which time he would have been 92 years old.